A 3-2 overtime loss for the St. Louis Blues, but you know what? I'll take it. I'll talk to you about this coming up here on Locked On Blues.
Hey, this is Brayden Chen. Subscribe to Locked On Blues.
You're Locked On Blues, your daily podcast on the St. Louis Blues. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On Blues. I am your host of Locked On Blues, Haley Taylor Simon, talking to you all things about our St. Louis Blues here in the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Last night, the Blues actually played a decent game against the Edmonton Oilers. The Blues did fall in overtime, 3-2. However, I was actually pleased with how this team did. Are you over Doug Armstrong? And I know what you're thinking, Haley. What exactly do you mean? I'm going to talk about why maybe I think that the decisions that he has made as of lately might be hurting the team's future. And then, of course, the Blues do have those Florida Panthers tomorrow who do make me a little bit nervous as they are the defending Cup champs. It's funny, you play the team that lost in the Cup finals and then you play the team that actually won. So it is a lot of competitive hockey for the St. Louis Blues. However, I do believe, okay, that the Panthers are not as strong as they were last season, so we'll talk about that. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Last night, I want to say, was a good night for Blues hockey. Yes, the teams did lose. The Blues didn't win, and you know what? I'm not saying that's okay, but at the end of the day, it is better than what's been happening, and that is them being embarrassed. It's interesting. I tend to believe that this team is better than what they are on paper, and I know that it's a little bit frustrating seeing how the Blues have played this season, but I was curious about how they would do against the Edmonton Oilers. I did a collaboration with Nick from Locked On Oilers, and we talked about the strengths of each team and the weaknesses of each team. It's funny, the Edmonton Oilers, they do have a lot of older players on their team above the age of 30, more so than any other team in the NHL. And while there's a lot of older players on the Blues, they still have some younger guys, which is a rarity with Edmonton. But the players at Edmonton, they have amazing players who are beyond talented. So for me, as somebody that is looking at both sides, right, I can kind of see why these two teams match up quite nice. I was a little bit nervous in the first frame because I was like, okay, I hope the Blues' energy doesn't fade away. But in the second frame, that energy definitely did come back. And I think when you're playing a team like Edmonton, who was notably one of the best teams in the NHL, with some of the best players in the NHL, it sparks a sense of competitiveness. And we see that a lot when the Blues take on the Dallas Stars. It's funny because when the Blues play other teams like Utah, and this isn't a diss on any team, even like the Blackhawks besides the Winter Classic, you can kind of sometimes see, and this is just within history, so even the Coyotes, we talked about that a lot last season. And I know Utah, Arizona, same team, different team though, because they relocated. But in teams' history, though, when they tend to play some of the teams that are not as good, you see the lack of energy, and it's very noticeable. But when the Blues take on teams that are some of the better teams in the NHL, you just notice a different shift of energy. And I wish that the Blues kept this up. A huge example is the San Jose Sharks, actually. And I don't know why they didn't come to my mind right away. Probably because I'm trying to block out what happened last season. But last season, when they played San Jose, they looked horrendous. But yet, when they played teams like the Avalanche, the Stars, Winnipeg, they looked great. So even though, yes, sometimes when the Blues do play better teams, it doesn't result in getting any points. It doesn't result in a win. You can see that they're consistently putting in extreme amount of energy on the ice. And I can't say that's the same for some of these other teams. And I think last night, it was a big game for a multitude of reasons. But I think it's because you have something to prove to Edmonton. The Blues made a really risky move with those offer sheets, and we're able to get 2 other younger players because, again, Edmonton has a lot of older players, right? And I think maybe, especially for Holloway, who is exceeding my expectations here in St. Louis, um, might have something to prove to the Oilers. And I think overall, at the end of the day, it's easy to say, well, maybe Edmonton didn't play as great as they usually do. So the Blues got lucky. While I don't think Edmonton played their best possible game, and I'm not going to deny that, I'm sure Nick from Locked On Oilers is not going to deny that. Edmonton still is Edmonton. And even when they don't play their best possible game, they're still a very great team. We saw Connor McDavid score a great power play goal for Edmonton in the second frame. In the first frame, by the way, there was no goal scored. And of course, he was assisted by Evan Bouchard and Leon Draisaitl. And a fun fact, Leon Draisaitl, this was his 42nd assist. So unbelievable. But then in the third period, we have a power play goal for the Blues. And this time it's Jordan Kyrou, who was assisted by Schenner and Holloway. And I think for the Blues, they have struggled notoriously on special teams. So again, when I do see a power play goal, I get excited. Not because I'm thinking, oh, well, this team's going to go to the playoffs. I don't think that still. I get excited because I'm seeing the good in players that maybe haven't been standing out as much. And I think for the Blues, it's definitely a huge confidence booster for this team. And there's no denying that. A couple minutes after Kyrou's goal, Colton Parayko scores and makes it 2-1. The Blues, and this was the only time they had the lead in this game. It didn't last too long, nearly 9 minutes, but he was assisted by Robert Thomas and Bushi. And again, this goal, I believe, was a big goal. Colton Parayko, I mean, he already exceeded his single season record. He now has 12 goals. The most he's ever had in a single season is 10. I told you guys he was going to beat it, but Colton Parayko has been playing some great hockey as of lately, and I am happy for him too because he does have the Four Nations face-off soon. He's on Team Canada with Jordan Binnington, the only 2 players that got on the Four Nations face-off, but repping the Blues. But I think that for Colton Parayko, he's having one of his better seasons, so it's good to see that for him. And then we had Leon Draisaitl give the Oilers an even scorecard. Right now it's 2-2. McDavid with his 47th assist, by the way, on that. Unbelievable. But it doesn't stop there because in overtime, nearly at the halfway mark, Connor Brown scores and McDavid then records his 48th assist. And when I was on with Nick, I did say that I was a fan of Connor Brown. I mean, there are certain players that you genuinely just kind of like watching, but I'm not upset about the loss for the Blues last night in a weird way. I mean, Binner had an exceptionally hard job last night. Total shots on goal were 39, 3 went in, and he saved 36. The Oilers were not afraid to shoot on the net. And then for Stuart Skinner, too, of the Edmonton Oilers, who was in net for them, he saved 20 goals. Yeah, so big difference compared to what Jordan Binnington had to save with 36. So 16 more goals. But overall, the Blues were able to bring this game to extra minutes, and against a team like the Edmonton Oilers, I would say that is a really good job. Last night, Colton Parayko led the defense with the most time on ice with 25 minutes. I don't expect any less from Colton Parayko. For the offense, it was Robert Thomas with 21 minutes. Now, I do want to say the only player that had single digits in terms of playing time was Zach Bolduc. He was only on the ice for 9 minutes, which was not ideal. Nathan Walker, 10 minutes. And why am I bringing this up to you? Because that does make me concerned. Texier only played 11 minutes. And again, he was a player that I know that Armstrong wanted to take a look at. So I was a little surprised that he hasn't been playing that much on the ice. But again, it's not surprising. And then obviously for Edmonton, the most amount of ice time went to Connor McDavid with 24 minutes. And then This is actually one of my, I don't know, like Corey Perry had he had 4 shots on goal. He is one of those players, and I don't know why, but I can't believe he's still in the NHL. And I know him and Suits are the same age, but it's so unbelievable to me that Corey Perry is in the NHL. Suter actually didn't have the least amount of time on ice for defenseman. It was actually Nick Leddy. Oh yeah, Nick Leddy returned. I don't know if I mentioned that. So Letty returned. Letty returned. So it's good to see Big Fish Nick Letty back on the ice again. I mean, obviously this season he really hasn't played much. He played his 5th game of the season last night. So again, good for Leds. It's funny. So I'm gonna throw back Thursday to like the first game of the season against Seattle. The Blues won. The Blues then won a couple days later in San Jose. Then they lost to the VGK. They lost to Minnesota, and that was on October 15th. And then the first game again was 2-4 last night and a loss in OT. But for Nick Leddy, 3 out of his 5 games, he has points in. So maybe Nick Leddy is the good luck charm that we all miss. I don't know. But what I do know is about my friends over at FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, my personal favorite, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to fanduel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's fanduel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Are you over Doug Armstrong? And this is a question that I ask a lot, not just to my Blues fans, but just hockey fans in general, because people do know Doug Armstrong. And I feel like it's one of those things where I respect him. Okay. I really do respect Doug Armstrong. And he's been with the Blues since 2008. And he served as the team's GM since 2010. So let that sink in. I think for Doug Armstrong, when he was first hired, he was the director of player personnel, and then he became general manager a couple years later, and he has been with this team for a while. But I will always say this. I'm thankful for Doug Armstrong. I am. Because here's the thing. He did help us win the Stanley Cup. I do believe at the end of the day, that is a huge thing. And even for Dougie A himself, and here's the thing that makes it hard. I know how much he loves this team. I do. And I get that he does. And that's cool. But what I get nervous about is the trade deadline. The Blues should be sellers at the trade deadline. And I don't know why, but I kind of feel like he's going to end up being a buyer. And I don't want that to be the case. And that's why I would be absolutely over it. And with Nick Leddy coming back, I'm not too sure that the Blues are going to acquire another defenseman. Here's the thing. The Blues are in a situation where they're not going to be a playoff team. And I'm over the experiments, right? I mean, you signed Cam Fowler. I get it. Like, he's been helpful. But don't you want to get younger? And that to me just seems ridiculous. Now, the Blues did make a move today. Let me go check my Blues PR email. So the Blues did recall Mackenzie McEachern from Springfield, and 6 goals, 9 assists this season. So good job for Urchern. That's actually not bad. And yes, obviously he's a forward, and I know Doug Armstrong said it last week that they wouldn't call any forwards up. Well, I guess it's a new week now. That to me was a weird statement that he made. I'm not gonna lie to you, but I just kind of feel like this Doug Armstrong experiment is just getting a little too far. I want the Blues to be a competitive hockey team again. And I feel like we haven't seen that in quite a while. And I feel like we're always kind of lollygagging around the idea of the Blues being somewhat of a competitive team. I mean, Mackenzie McGurturn, I mean, he's 30. He's older. And that, to me, doesn't scream great moves. Now, again, is it the biggest problem to have him called up? No, it's not. But it's not the player that I would have called up. And I think, too, when you really do take into account players that should be called up, you have to think about one specific player, and that is Dvorsky. And I don't know if it's because Doug's trying to protect him so much, but I can't imagine in any way that somebody's going to say, no, you're making a bad decision if you call him up. I think that you're giving him an opportunity, maybe allowing him to feel more comfortable and ready for when he is actually like finalized in this roster. I just don't think it makes much sense not to utilize somebody who's doing great for things for you with the Thunderbirds. I mean, he was an all-star for crying out loud with the AHL. And other people noticed him. Like I'm seeing on social media, other people are like, oh my gosh, this Dvorsky guy is awesome. And I think that's where my frustration with Doug really does sit in, because it's not just to the point where maybe he's not making moves that I personally want. He's making moves that are not helping this organization and the team. You want the Blues to be a competitive team. You want the Blues to go back to the playoffs. But yet you're bringing up guys that are in their 30s, signing guys that are in their 30s. And no offense to anybody who's in their 30s, but 30 in hockey is a little bit older. And you don't want to be like the Edmonton Oilers. Or no, like obviously, yes, you want to be like the Edmonton Oilers. I get it. Where you have a bunch of guys that are older that may not be here for a while. Now, the difference between the two teams is that the Edmonton Oilers are really good, and the players that they have that are older are super talented. For the Blues, it's a bit of a different situation. You don't really have that type of talent. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, and I'm not trying to be harsh. I'm not trying to be any of that. What I'm trying to be is realistic, not just for me, but for you. Because Doug Armstrong constantly makes decisions that I have to just ask myself, what is going on? Like Drew Bannister, I would have not, first off, okay, here we go. Am I going to go on my initial rant? Yes, I am. Firing Craig Berube was stupid. It was a stupid decision. I know. Oh my God, the locker room was lost. Okay, well, what happened to Drew Bannister? There was a poll that was recently done, and people voted. It was like, which NHL coach would you least want to play for? Somehow Drew Bannister's name was on this list. Now, personally, I'm like, whoa, because I did not think that honestly happened, like to where people notice an interim head coach and were like, oh, I don't want to play for him. But the fact that he was on the list, I'm like, oh, wow, people really must have had their thoughts about him. I don't know what kind of coach he was, right? I was in the locker room a couple times with him as the head coach, but I'm biased. I'm biased towards the guy that won us the Stanley Cup and Craig Berube. I mean, what Berube was able to do for this team is something that, and I say that's out of respect, it's something that Bannister would have never been able to do. Now, I do like Jim Montgomery, and it is what it is. I think that this team just has more problems than anything, and it's not necessarily a coach. But when Doug made that move, I'm talking about the move with Berube, that to me kind of just put a bad taste in my mouth, I guess you can say, and kind of started my main freak out point of OMG, what is he doing? Because this is ridiculous. And I'm going to feel that way. And I'm not going to stop feeling that way. And I hope you understand that I'm coming from a place of goodness. I'm coming from a place of, I want this team to be successful. I just don't think that Doug Armstrong always makes the best decisions. He makes emotional decisions. So I'm going to talk more about that, I'm sure, but I do want to talk to my friends over at Gametime. Looking for tickets for your next big event, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, WWE, sport events, finding the right tickets at the right place can be a headache. But with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates for the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through 1,000 of endless listings. I've been using Gametime Picks for a while now, and here's why I love it. The curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options. I recently grabbed a super deal for a prime seat, and I couldn't believe the value, okay? I am heading to Super Bowl 59. Yes, that is right. I am going. And of course, I told you all last week that Gametime had the best possible options. And don't forget that seat view feature on the Gametime app is a game changer, okay? Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly where my seat will be and what it will look like in the venue. It's so reassuring. And the best part is you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So the Blues and those Florida Panthers. You see, it's funny. Florida is one of those teams that is really good. We're hosting them. So yes, hometown boy Matthew Tkachuk will be back home. But I don't believe that this Florida team is just as good as last season. But yes, they are still a very good team. So of course, that does make me a little bit nervous. But for the Blues themselves, I do feel like, you know what? This could be a game where they thrive and persevere. So let's go take a look fast at the Florida Panthers and kind of talk about why I feel like they're not descending by any mean. They're a really good team, and I'm not taking that away from them. But last night, they fell to the Capitals 6-3. Unlike Florida to let up 6 goals, a lot of goals, but the Caps have been a really good team this season. They beat the Islanders 6-3. It's not a 6-3. They beat the Blackhawks 5-1. They shut out the Kings 3-0. They lose to the Golden Knights, a 4-1 loss. And then they beat San Jose 7-2. The Kings did beat them on the 22nd, 2-1. And then it was a 5-2 win for the Panthers over the Ducks. So yeah, like they're a good team. But a couple games I will point out is the Red Wings beating them 5-2. Then you have the Bruins beating them 4-5 in OT. And the Bruins and Panthers do play each other a lot. But if we're looking at some of the players on the Florida Panthers, right? You have Matthew Tkachuk, obviously hometown guy. Barkov, great player. Reinhart, great player. Bobrovsky, Annette, great player. Sam Bennett, great player. Carter Verhaeghe, a great player. Nate Schmidt, great player. Oh, you know what's funny? I crack myself up. Oh my goodness, I forgot he played for them now. It is Nico Mikkola. He used to be here in St. Louis. We did draft him, and now he's with Florida. He did play for the Rangers for like a little bit. So funny. I always forget about like random players, and I'm like, oh, once a Blue. Evan Rodriguez, Forsling. Who else is on the Ekblad? They just have such a good team. Spencer Knight. Oh my goodness. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him in net, but Yeah, the Panthers are a pretty good team. It has me a little bit nervous about how they will do. I want to take a look back to last season, actually. 2023, 2024 season. I always like random statistics, right? But I don't know if they're gonna have last season game records. Let's go see. In the last 10 games, the Panthers have been 4-4-2 in their last 10 games versus the Blues. Interesting. So let's go see. In December, it was a Panthers win. Last January, it was a Panthers win. In 2023, it was a Panthers loss. The Blues actually beat the Panthers a lot. You know what? I feel like, you know what, this could be a win for the Blues tomorrow night. Keep the point streak alive. At least if it goes to OT, at least it's something. You know what? Don't keep the point streak alive. Let's go take a gander, actually, at the standings. I know, Haley, you're all over the place. No, this is just what happens when you're at this point of the season. Do you want to win, or do you want to get a good draft pick? Ooh. So right now, the Blues are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in the bottom 9. What do you think? Do you want to get the point, or do you want to get the draft pick? The Blues have 53 points. So does Pittsburgh, the Flyers, Utah. Interesting. We'll see. All right. Well, I'll talk to you tomorrow on Locked On Blues, and we'll preview that game hosting Matthew Tkachuk and the Florida Panthers. Like always, let's go Blues.